Hello, my name is Mackenzie Cooper. I'm the PK-12 Student Data Analyst and the Grad Drop Business Lead with CEPI. Welcome to the GAD Audit Functions presentation. The objectives for today's meeting is to review how to gain access to the GAD application. We'll also review the GAD dashboard, audit findings student list, the audit findings building list, and then the student data, the audit findings requests page, and the acceptable documentation. The GAD cycle consists of 4 phases. There is the preceding school year, the appeals window, which opens mid-July through mid-September, the audit window, which runs from October through late November, which is where we're currently at, and then the final rates release, which occurs in early February. Now jumping into the GAD application. The GAD application is used to review and audit graduation and dropout data. GAD is a reference that is used to define graduation and dropout, but it is also a reference used for identifying the graduation and dropout application. So what is GAD? The initial data in the GAD application is a snapshot of data from after end of year closeout, and it consists of MSDS general collections and SRM submissions. This data refreshes at the audit window to include updates made in MSDS during the appeals window via the SRM submissions. The GAD application houses multiple different cohort years, basically representing students reported in 9th grade or higher. So you'll have access to see the high school freshmen, the high school sophomores, the juniors, the current graduates, which make up the 4-year rates, those that graduated last year, which make up the 5-year rates, and those that graduated 2 years ago, which make up the 6-year rates. Those assigned to the 5-year and 6-year cohorts can only be modified in GAD via an audit finding by the ISD auditor. The reason for that is because technically this data has already been audited, and so it must go through the auditor in order for a change to be made. Now jumping into how to receive access to the MSDS and GAD application, you do have to complete a user application security form indicating that you're requesting access to both applications, so both MSDS and GAD. If you identify users as you're going through your reports who should no longer receive access to MSDS or GAD, make sure you also submit an authorized user removal request form so that we can remove their access and they'll no longer receive any potential mailings from us in the future. In order to have access to modify the graduation and dropout application data, you must be assigned the auditor role within that user application security form. So this slide shows you what the GAD application will look like when you first log into GAD. This is a snapshot, which is why it's a little blurry, so I apologize for that. However, this is the easiest way for us to show you without displaying any specific data related to the district or the individual students. So when you log into GAD, again, this is what you'll see. You'll want to select first underneath the dashboard the district that you're looking to view. If you have access to multiple districts, you might have a few listed under your drop-down menu. I believe most will only see the districts that they are assigned to, or actually you should only receive the districts that you're assigned to. So if you do see that you're assigned to any districts you should not be, please let us know, and we can look into receiving some form of adjustment requests from you so that we can make the modifications on our end. So underneath of the district drop-down menu, you'll see the ISD auditor functions, and then the progress at a glance, which is under 2 on this list. So this provides a total number of the buildings that the auditor has access to and the number of buildings that will need to be completed within the audit. It'll also show you a summary of each cohort status assigned within those buildings and what the totals are. Next to the progress at a glance, you have the view and update data section next to 3 here. Below that, you'll see a series of links. We do have the audit findings student list, the audit findings building list, and the audit findings request. These are all functions available to the ISD auditor that will assist you in the process of performing your audit. We'll go into what each one of those links leads to later in the presentation. We also provide reports within the GAD application. There is the cohort report and the graduation rate report. I'll also go into a deeper dive on each one of those reports and what you'll have access to see when you download them. And as you can see, number 5 all the way up at the very top is UIC Quick Search. This provides quick access to an individual student record, and it allows you to see the historical data, including any general and SRM collections that they were submitted in. It will also show any previous year GAD findings that may have been entered on behalf of the ISD auditor. Within the graduation and dropout application dashboard, you'll have the option to select under the View and Update Data section for the auditor, Audit Findings Student List. Within that page, this is where auditors can submit changes to submit exit code updates, exit dates, additional graduation awards, and select which students have been sampled and audited. The student list will load once you select a building and an associated exit code, or you also have the option to select graduated or exempt cohort statuses. You can use this list to select which students you choose or have chosen to sample or audit. You just have to check the sampled box next to the student details or the audited box if you're submitting some form of an audit modification. If you audit a student and submit a finding, make sure to select the audited checkbox and add a comment that includes the list of documentation that you verified and also your initials and the date. And then once you submit the finding, you'll just want to make sure that you click Save. We do have a copy of the Save box both at the top and the very bottom of the screen. The Save button is duplicated, so the function will be the same. If the changes are complete for the building, then you also have the option to check the box next to Building Complete. Then you'll want to click Save again, just to make sure that those changes have loaded the way they should be. So as I mentioned, this is where you'll find that sampled box, and then here is where you'll find the audited box. We also have a checkbox for high school equivalency. That is to capture any students that have received a GED since previously exiting the district. That data is imported through the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department, and we'll go over more of that later in the presentation as well. Auditors do have the option to submit a comment without modifying any of the data within the student's file. That would often happen if documentation was received, but it didn't elicit an actual change. Oftentimes the auditor will note that within the comments, just saying that this was a sampled student, documentation was provided, and the appropriate information is on file. This page also defaults to view 25 records at a time. What I like to do is automatically go to this page and select all, so that all of the records are within one sheet that you can just go ahead and scroll through and make your selections as you need to. We just had a few additional notes regarding the audit findings student list to go over. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, you do have the option to filter the student list by the cohort status of either exempt or graduated. It is required that auditors audit or sample a specific percentage from each group, whether it be graduates and completers or exempt. So this is just another feature that makes it easier for the auditor to go through their process of pulling a sample. It is also documented within our system that only one audit can be submitted per day per student within a given timeline. And so once submitted, the new exit code, exit date, and the comments field will be grayed out, and the status will change to P, meaning pending, for that student until the following day. So if you accidentally submitted a finding in error, then you would have to wait until the following day to make that correction. And then the data will load via a nightly refresh process to MSDS after you've submitted the finding. If you're inserting a comment for the students, the sampled box does have to be checked in order for that comment to save as a GAD finding and reflect in MSDS. Again, sometimes comments can be submitted without an actual modification being made. Even if that is the case, it's not necessary for you to load that as an audit finding, so don't feel obligated to do that. There isn't actually a way for us to identify a comment in MSDS. It would just show as a GAD finding. So we would just obviously be able to identify that nothing's been modified, even though a finding was submitted. Now diving into the audit findings building list. This is an optional step that auditors can utilize throughout the audit process. This page lets the auditor view and check off which buildings they have completed within the audit. Once you've checked off a building, you'll just want to make sure to hit save to capture that you've completed it. Again, this isn't something that we on the CEPI team verify is completed. This is truly just a resource for auditors to utilize. Now the last link within the View and Update Data section within the GAD dashboard for auditors is the audit finding request. So this screen lets the auditor view a summary of the requests they have submitted. All audit finding requests submitted are automatically approved. Depending upon the link selected from the main menu, you may see a summary of all requests or only those from a specified selection. So as you can see on this screenshot here, you have the option to select all districts or an individual district. You also have the option to detail into a specific building, and then you can filter by the year. As I mentioned earlier, we do automatically input data from the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department, and it is matched to students assigned to the active cohort years that we are running rates on. And it applies to anyone who has a cohort status of dropout or missing expected record, or we also call them MERS, if they have been identified as receiving a high school equivalency. You'll notice on the screen here, I have a screenshot of what it will look like in the GAD application if a student had been identified as receiving a high school equivalency. They will be coded as exit code 5. The exit date is typically the end of the school year. And then we'll have the checkbox selected under high school equivalency. And that's honestly, this checkbox and that exit code is your big indicator that we linked the data. This is not something we recommend that auditors adjust. There might even be a system business rule in place that would prevent it if you did try to make a modification to any record that is coded as 05 within the application. But as you're going through and making your sample selections, please make sure not to select anyone with an exit code of 05. Now jumping into the graduation and dropout application reports. So this includes the GAD cohort report, which as you can see on the screenshot is the very first report that pops up at the bottom of the list. You do have the option to run this report for each active cohort year that will be impacting graduation rates. This list provides a very detailed spreadsheet that includes all of these fields. This is really handy for districts and also auditors to utilize as they're making their sample selections. Within the report, you have the option to filter it by cohort status to see which students are impacting those specific cohorts. This is really nice because, again, the auditors are expected to sample a specific percentage of graduates and completers and also exempt exit codes. And so this is a great way to identify the list of those students if you're not looking to utilize the individual student list option, which is available again within the View and Update Data link on the dashboard. This report is also great for utilizing the EMC additional graduation awards that had been previously reported by a district. Because it specifies which award was received or marked received. I know in the past a lot of districts tend to accidentally check the wrong additional graduation awards, so this is a common one that generates a lot of audit findings and corrections. So if that is the case, this report is a great resource for you to see all of those early middle college students, and then again, select which ones you'll choose to sample. We also have the graduation rates report, which is available again within the GAD application. So it's this option right here. You can select it for the district level. You do have the option to select a PDF or also, I believe, an Excel sheet. Once you click your option, you'll then click View Report and it will download. This report is great because it shows all of the buildings that are associated with the district rates for graduation and also dropout. It'll also include the individual building rates that are determined for each active cohort year. Once that report downloads, if you choose to select a PDF, which is oftentimes the one I'm picking, you'll see multiple sheets within the spreadsheet. The first one will include the district total as well as which buildings are impacting the current graduation rates. The second one will include the 5-year rates and the buildings associated with that district. And then the third report or third sheet will include the 6-year rates and also list the district total and the buildings associated with that district. Now diving into the GAD audit practices. I've mentioned it a few times now, but it is expected that auditors select at least 2% of the students that were marked as graduates or completers. It is expected to be a randomly selected representative of the 2% sample. Hopefully it's for, or ideally it is going to be for each exit code that can be submitted that results in either graduate or completer status. That would include the following exit codes that I have listed here. So as I mentioned earlier, ideally it would be easiest for auditors to utilize the student list to filter by these exit statuses or exit codes to then go through and select which students they're choosing to sample. You'll also want to determine the error rate, and if it is above 5%, you will be expected to pull an additional 10% sample and test. And then you'll continue this process until the cumulative error rate is 5% or lower, or all graduate and completer records have been reviewed. If the district does not provide supporting documentation, it is expected that the auditor change the exit code to status unknown, which is exit code 16. It is also expected that auditors pull 5% of any student or any UICs that were listed with an exempt cohort status. That does include the following exit codes provided in the screenshot here. Again, it would be a random selection, and ideally you would select each or a UIC from each exit code being reported. I understand that sometimes not every exit code is going to be reported, in which case obviously just pull it based on what you have available. You will then go ahead and determine the error rate, and then if it is above 5%, you'll want to pull an additional 10% sample and test, and then continue that process until the cumulative error rate is 5% or lower, or all exempt records are reviewed. Now, once the auditors have selected which records will be sampled, they either email a list of the UICs or provide the district with an audit packet. Um, then the supporting documentation will be submitted to the auditor to justify which exit codes for those sample records are basically provided with additional paperwork, meaning that the districts didn't just select an exit code based on their own judgment. They had some form of documentation um, on record with them to submit the code that they've reported. If the code does require updating, then the auditor is expected to submit a finding within the GAD application. And the data will then refresh to MSDS via a nightly update process that is scheduled to occur during the audit window. Now, the GAD audit district expectations does include reviewing the sampled UICs that are provided from the ISD auditor, and then again pulling and providing that documentation that they have on record, and giving it to the auditor to explain why they submitted the exit codes they submitted. Make sure you also verify that any transcripts that you may be submitting have been signed. It's just a common little detail that tends to get overlooked. So please verify that as you're submitting the documentation. I also have a note on here that the GAD audit window will close on November 25th. It is typical for the GAD audit window to close during the end of November. I also have a reference here for the exit code crosswalks. This information is essential to know because the exit codes reported in MSDS determine the cohort status that gets assigned, which then directly impacts the graduation and dropout rates. If you find yourself questioning a cohort status and why it's being reflected as it is, I highly recommend using this resource as a reference point to verify that the exit code is functioning as it's supposed to be and generating the correct exit status. If you do have additional questions regarding this, please feel free to reach out to me or our customer support team. I also included a link to the acceptable exit status documentation within the presentation. This allows you to see what the districts can provide to prove the exit codes they reported are correct. If they do not have this documentation to support the exit code, again, it is expected that the auditor submit the unknown status, which is exit code 16, for whichever student is identified. That concludes today's presentation regarding the GAD audit functions. My name is Mackenzie Cooper again. I provided my email at the top there, and I also included our customer support team email as well. Our customer support team is pretty great. They have been around for a long time, and they've handled a lot of the graduation and dropout questions throughout the years. So if they don't have the answer, they will reach out to me, and it is possible that you could hear from me through them, which is fine. If honestly, I don't have a preference on who you contact. Just please reach out if you have any additional questions regarding the GAD audit process. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.